This is the story of Zozo Ameshiki's career. Tokyo, Japan. Zozo Ameshiki stepped into the headquarters of a major corporation with an annual revenue of 300 billion yen. He took note of the transparent glass walls and the lush greenery inside the building. Just as he expected, such an important office had to exude elegance and professionalism. Ameshiki believed that the entrance to an office played a vital role in shaping the company's image, much like the entrance to a home, where its arrangement reflects the sincerity of its occupants. Zozo Ameshiki, a professional job hopper who had walked through the entrances of countless major corporations, always impeccably dressed and stylish, he had come to this company for his final interview. Usually, job hopping is understood as changing jobs frequently, but in his case, he did it to secure better conditions and hone his skills. Always aiming for new heights, he had worked for many large companies, but the skills those companies could offer were becoming limited. Therefore, he was now targeting this major corporation. Standing before a mirror, he adjusted his hair and checked his friendly smile. Satisfied with what he saw, he felt more confident. After passing a series of rigorous evaluation rounds, he had finally reached the final interview. The screening process was truly harsh, and many people had been eliminated. Now, all that remained was to pass this interview, and he would complete his job transition. Although he could anticipate some of the questions, he remained ready to face any challenge. The interviewers might ask many difficult questions, and he understood that not everything would go according to plan. As the receptionist signaled for him to enter the interview room, Ameshiki stood up confidently, telling himself that his extensive career experience was enough to handle the situation. He was certain that his skills would be useful even in a major corporation. Determined, the young job hopper opened the door, but instead of the interview room he expected, before him lay a vast, sprawling grassland. Confused, he thought he had entered the wrong room and was seeing one of those green spaces that some large corporations integrate into the workplace to provide relaxation for employees. Realizing his carelessness, he told himself he must have accidentally walked into a different room without noticing. He turned back to open the door, to return to the waiting room, but before him was an empty space stretching into infinity. Keeping calm, he told himself that he had wandered into an unfamiliar place. However, that calmness didn't last long as he quickly fell into a panic, clutching his head in despair, wondering where he was and what had happened to his final interview. Noticing his skin looked unusual, smoother than before, Ameshiki quickly took a selfie. To his astonishment, he realized he had become younger, looking no different than when he was 18 years old. But, out of ingrained habit, he immediately thought this was a huge advantage for his career. Obviously, an 18-year-old with his qualifications and experience would be the dream of any company. However, he quickly pulled himself back to reality and realized that now was not the time to think that way. Ameshiki wondered if a place like this even existed in Japan, or if he was even there anymore. Observing his surroundings, he discovered species of plants and creatures he had never seen before. That's when he realized a shocking truth. He had been transported to another world, Isekai'd. Realizing this wasn't difficult for him, as it was a familiar plot device in the games, an anime he had watched back in Japan. Therefore, his conclusion was clear and natural. Feeling his breast pocket, he found a strange plate. When activated, it functioned like a status window. Checking its contents, he was astonished to see his abilities reflected in numbers. Ameshiki realized he possessed extraordinary magical power, but his physical stats were quite weak, fitting for someone who only exercised to stay healthy and enjoy the life of a typical office worker. Ameshiki grew curious when he saw his occupation listed as job changer. When he tapped on that tab, he discovered he could change to any occupation in this world, at the cost of a little MP, magical power. A flood of questions rushed through Ameshiki's mind. Was this occupation unique and exclusive to him because of his job-hopping history? How did the interview location connect to another world? He briefly considered waiting to see if other candidates would appear, or if someone else, like a player 2, would show up here. But he quickly dismissed that thought, knowing it would all be over if he ran out of water, and just clinging to that single clue wasn't the way to go. Ameshiki realized he couldn't just stand still. His personality didn't allow for passivity, as he always believed that somehow everything would work out. Ameshiki was someone who was always ready to act and move forward no matter how ambiguous the situation. While maintaining a positive spirit, His proactive attitude was quickly shattered when he ran straight into a giant mantis. As soon as it spotted him, the mantis charged, chasing him relentlessly and putting him in a perilous situation. Amashiki realized his strategy had backfired spectacularly. Despite trying his best, he couldn't outrun the mantis. Changing tactics, he turned to face it at the base of a tall tree, trying to find a way to talk or negotiate his way out of the situation. But this effort proved futile as he barely managed to dodge the mantis's attack. Its slash cut down the tree trunk behind him, then it continued to climb the tree before falling to the ground with a loud thud. Looking at the scene of destruction, Amashiki bitterly realized that negotiating with such a creature was impossible. As the mantis stood menacingly above him, he understood that if he remained motionless, death was inevitable. In desperation, he frantically wondered what he could do to save himself. He briefly thought about finding a weapon, but then quickly remembered the job-changing power he possessed. In a fit of desperation, he pulled out his status plate, activated it, and yelled a request to change his class. He chose to become a mage. Instantly, he was surrounded by mystical symbols representing the magic of this world. A new source of power surged within him, and with it, the knowledge and techniques of a mage automatically flowed into his mind. He could now use magic as naturally as if he had been practicing his entire life. In a mix of confidence and desperation, he raised his hand, activating a magic circle, and launched a fireball straight at the approaching mantis. The mantis was completely caught off guard by the attack. It was immediately engulfed in flames and turned into a pile of ash. Amashiki stood there stunned, completely lost in the shock of what had just happened, trying to process it all in his mind. Amashiki raised his fist in a triumphant cheer, but then looked at his hand in confusion. He had just changed his class and was already able to use magic. Was this the true power of a job changer? Amashiki's thoughts were quickly interrupted by a vibrant melody that rang out from nowhere. He soon realized it was the sign that he had leveled up after defeating the mantis. Checking his status window, he realized this world was just like a game. However, as he looked at the pile of ash that was once the mantis, he realized that only the system here was game-like, because everything else was terrifyingly real. Amashiki could still feel the heat from the magic he had just used, and remembered how he had almost gotten his head sliced off earlier. At that moment, Amashiki understood an important truth. If he treated this world as just a game and acted carelessly, the price would be his life. This was no joke. He had to face this new reality seriously. He screamed as he looked up at the sky, declaring that he had spent his entire career working for bigger companies, all for the sake of a better life. Then he paused, pointing out that his career had been built to climb the corporate ladder of modern Japan. Now, he wondered if any of that still had value in a world teeming with monsters and magic. After some reflection, he concluded that all the effort he had put in until now had become meaningless. A sense of disappointment washed over him. The young man who was once a rising star in the corporate world now knelt down, feeling utterly humbled in this strange world. Gritting his teeth, he told himself that he had to start again from scratch. With the power of a job changer, he could become any class he wanted. His previous battle with the mantis had made the importance of this power crystal clear. The strength of different classes was the core of this world, so it stood to reason that if he could level up various classes, he could prove his strength anywhere. Having made his decision, Amashiki stood up with renewed determination, resolved to master every class in this world. Sitting in the shade of the trees, he summoned a ball of water from the air with his mage powers, letting it materialize in his palm. Thanks to magic, he no longer had to worry about a lack of water, so he began to address other problems. The presence of monsters made camping outdoors impossible for now, and basic necessities like food, clothing, and shelter were still essential. With determination, he set his sights on finding a settlement. Amashiki considered changing his class once again to one that might be useful in his current situation. Opening his status window, he saw that he had spent 20 MP on his last class change, plus the MP used for the fireball in the fight with the mantis, and even more for the water spell. Thanks to the mage's passive skill, his MP was slowly recovering. This led him to conclude that he didn't need to be too conservative about changing classes. He started scrolling through the class list until he found a suitable one. The moment he chose the hunter class, his senses immediately became extraordinarily sharp, allowing him to easily detect abnormalities in nature. Amashiki began using his heightened sense of smell to search for clues. Using his sharp vision and hearing, Amashiki discovered faint traces of human footprints in the grass. along with bloodstains on the undersides of leaves. The blood had almost soaked into the ground, indicating it had been shed about 2 days ago. The human and wolf-like tracks seemed to indicate that a hunt or a battle had taken place here. Either way, Amashiki concluded that he could find a settlement by following these tracks. Holding his briefcase, he eagerly set off, pushing through the dense foliage, until he stood before a well-fortified village in a clearing. Amashiki felt a wave of relief, unbothered that it was a small village instead of the town he had hoped for. Seeing residents walking around, he couldn't believe how happy he was to see other people again. With no more need to search for tracks in the forest, Amashiki immediately changed his class back to mage, ready to face new challenges. A young boy wearing a headband stood guard at the village entrance, holding a crude spear. Amashiki adjusted his tie and approached the boy with his most professional smile. However, instead of a welcome, he only received strange looks. Realizing his attire seemed out of place, the young guard asked who he was. Understanding that his appearance was the reason for the boy's suspicion, Amashiki got straight to the point, introducing himself by name and identifying as a wandering mage. The boy didn't believe him, asserting that it was impossible for a job holder to come to such a remote place. He then demanded to see Amashiki's status plate as proof, prompting the flustered young man to pull the plate from his breast pocket. Amashiki solemnly presented his status plate to the young guard. The boy was both amazed to realize he was telling the truth and confused by the strange way he presented the plate. After apologizing for his doubt, the boy explained that job holders usually worked under the service of the nation, or nobles, or they would go to large cities to work as adventurers. Therefore, it was very rare to see them in remote places like this village. Amashiki realized that just like in Japan or anywhere else, people in this world also moved to places where they could best use their abilities and earn a higher income. So, the boy's suspicion was understandable. Bending the truth a little, Amashiki confidently declared that he had been training his magic in the mountains and wanted to experience village life for a change of pace. Of course, he conveniently left out the fact that he was here because he was completely lost in a strange world. Amashiki had actually only just arrived this morning and was desperately searching for any sign of civilization. The young guard accepted his answer, assuming it explained his lack of common knowledge. Amashiki felt a bit irritated at being seen as someone lacking common sense, but his thoughts were cut short when the boy turned to tell him that he had a request for a job holder like him. The young boy said he could be called Zozo. The boy then asked him to come to the village chief's house to discuss the details. They quickly arrived at a house situated on a small hill in the center of the village. The young guard eagerly rushed inside, asking to speak with the village chief. The elderly man called out to Zozo. He was overjoyed to hear that a job holder had arrived in the village with Zozo. Finding their excitement a bit strange, Amashiki remained calm as the village chief introduced himself as Esta. He was surprised when Amashiki courteously presented his status plate and asked about the request Zozo had mentioned. Becoming serious, Esta revealed that monsters known as silver wolves had appeared near the village, confirming Amashiki's suspicion that the tracks he'd seen earlier were from a monster attack. While the villagers could handle a few stray monsters, facing an entire pack was a major challenge. Therefore, they hoped a job holder like him could help them defeat the pack. Zozo went on to explain that there were no other job holders in the village, as everyone else was just a commoner. This made Amashiki realize just how rare job holders were in this world. He reasoned that with the constant threat from monsters, the risks might be high, but the demand for combat jobs must be enormous. According to Esta and Zozo, silver wolves were fast-moving, wolf-like creatures with a keen sense of smell, sharp fangs and claws, and distinctive silver fur. They were ranked E by the Adventurers Guild, the second lowest power level. While a few villagers could defeat a single silver wolf, the village was very small and everyone had to work just to survive. So, if someone got injured during a hunt, the consequences would be severe. Plus, they always needed people to stay behind and protect the village, making it nearly impossible for them to deal with an entire pack. Amashiki felt annoyed that the monsters were disrupting the village's operations, and his ears twitched as the village chief pleaded with him to accept the quest, promising a handsome reward. He had fought monsters before without the advantage of a job change, and besides, he had already decided to strive for a career in this world. He would do whatever he deemed beneficial for himself. Standing tall and confident, Amashiki thumped his chest and agreed to take the job. Esta and Zozo immediately praised him enthusiastically, even though he hadn't completed the task yet. He found them a bit simple, but since he knew nothing about this world and had no money or place to live, he went along with it. Amashiki realized he would have to rely on their help for a while, so he reasoned it was best to do them a favor. Without hesitation, he prepared to start his mission, only to be interrupted by his loudly rumbling stomach. Slightly embarrassed, he asked for a bite to eat before starting the hunt. The two villagers looked at each other in disbelief, realizing he hadn't even brought any food with him. Soon enough, Amashiki had a full stomach and was equipped with more practical, form-fitting adventurer's clothes for his mission. Although he felt like a cosplayer, he steeled his resolve to track the silver wolves. Back in the forest, he noticed the plants were completely alien, unlike anything he had ever seen before, and he wondered if they were edible. At this point, he checked his job list and eventually found the appraiser job. The appraiser job allowed the user to determine the value of any item and check the status of others, with the information gained varying depending on the level difference. Using his new job, Amashiki scanned an herb and realized it had healing properties. He decided to harvest some to sell for profit, while also considering the future use of the pharmacist and alchemist jobs to make his own medicine and potions, thrilling him with the idea. The appraisal skill also helped him distinguish a nearly identical but poisonous plant, which he most likely would have mistaken without it. This made Amashiki incredibly grateful to have access to accurate information in a world without the internet. Amashiki considered that changing jobs every time he needed something could be a hassle. However, he recalled that in games, players could level up and then switch to another, or a higher-tier job without losing their previous skills. This seemed to apply to him, as he still clearly remembered the knowledge and methods of using magic from when he was a mage, and those skills remained intact. To test this, he tried to fire a stone dart from his fingertip. Surprisingly, he succeeded, though the projectile was much smaller than expected. However, he was overwhelmed by the terrifying level of destruction it caused after being fired. Just as he felt a massive drain on his magical power, Amashiki was stunned to find himself collapsing to the ground, unable to stand. Opening his status window, Amashiki confirmed that he had used 50 MP for just one spell, proving that using magic while not in the mage job was incredibly costly. As he lay on the ground recovering, he realized that using skills appropriate to his job was the most efficient system, which made perfect sense when considering the point mechanics. This was a significant discovery. He figured that combining magic and swordsmanship would be extremely powerful in combat, while combining magic with non-combat jobs like appraiser would be ideal for surprise attacks. Despite the high MP cost, he thought it was worth it. However, Amashiki knew he needed to raise his level in order to increase his available MP. Suddenly, Amashiki's hunter senses kicked in. As he caught the scent of a beast on the wind, he quickly hid behind some bushes as 3 ferocious silver wolves appeared. Checking their statuses, he saw that while they had high agility, he still outmatched them, so he could escape if necessary. Confident in his skills, Amashiki switched to the mage job and created 3 stone darts, then fired them at the wolves from behind the bushes. Caught by surprise, 2 of the wolves were instantly taken out, but he missed the third, only managing to wound its shoulder. The surviving wolf went berserk, turning to face him and lunging with its sharp fangs bared. In desperation, Amashiki summoned one last stone lance, aiming it at the charging monster at point-blank range. Closing his eyes, he fired, and the stone projectile successfully obliterated the beast. Still in shock, Amashiki approached the wolf's corpse and poked it with his finger to make sure it was dead. Breathing a sigh of relief when the beast didn't stir, he collapsed backward, relieved. Immediately after, an upbeat tune played, signaling that he had leveled up again. Opening his status window, he clenched his fist in delight upon seeing that his level had increased, along with his base stats and maximum MP. Sensing the presence of other pack members gathering nearby, Amashiki considered his strategy of continuously switching jobs to deal with them. A cunning smile spreading across his face, he declared that he would turn these monsters into stepping stones for his career. When Amashiki left the village to hunt, Zozo had told him that the fangs of a silver wolf would serve as proof of his victory, instructing him to collect them. After completing the task, he examined the corpse of the wolf he had just defeated, noting its determination in a life-or-death struggle, something unimaginable in the peaceful society of modern Japan. From this experience, Amashiki realized that to survive in this world, he had to master the art of job switching. Besides that, something else was on his mind. During his recent level up, he had noticed that his stats, particularly MP and intelligence, had increased significantly. He believed this was a direct result of defeating the monster. As a mage, Amashiki realized that the stat gains would have been different if he had used a sword instead of magic. However, any further investigation into this would have to wait, as he sensed more monsters approaching. From the bushes, several silver wolves emerged, far different from the previous three. These wolves were already wary of his presence and brimming with killing intent. Amashiki realized he had only faced a scout party before, and now he was up against the entire pack. Facing the fiercely growling creatures, he used his mage powers to create 8 stone lances. The projectiles swiftly took out 4 of the wolves, thinning the pack's numbers, but the remaining ones continued their charge, with terrifying speed and aggression. He launched another attack, barely managing to graze one with his finger, but as a wolf's corpse fell beside him, he realized the stone lances had pierced their targets with greater force, likely due to his increased magical power. However, his excitement was short-lived, as the surviving silver wolves charged past their fallen comrades and prepared to pounce on him menacingly. Amashiki realized that at this range he wouldn't be able to cast a spell in time, so he quickly switched his job to swordsman. Drawing the sword the villagers had provided, he decapitated the first wolf with a single, clean slash. Twirling the blade over his head, he moved to face the final silver wolf. He could feel power surging through his arm, and the monster's movements now seemed to slow down before his eyes. So this was what it felt like to be a swordsman. After felling the last beast, Amashiki sheathed his sword and stood amidst the bloody battlefield. Suddenly, the upbeat tune played once more, signaling that he had leveled up again. Amashiki had leveled up, just as he'd thought, after defeating the last of the silver wolves as a swordsman. This resulted in a significant boost to his strength and agility. This confirmed that each job affected stat growth differently, meaning he could, to some extent, control his stat progression by switching jobs. This was a major discovery, and Amashiki made a mental note to experiment more as he decided on the direction of his build. Some time passed, and the silence of the forest was broken only by the calls of a flock of birds taking flight. Alerted by the sound, Amashiki reached for his sword, but nothing appeared. Nearly an hour after his battle with the large pack, he still hadn't spotted any new monsters in the area. Amashiki figured it would be unwise to venture deeper into the forest, as it might attract the attention of the rest of the pack. Having defeated 13 more silver wolves, he was confident he had significantly thinned their numbers, and his pouch full of fangs was clear proof of it. Deciding to head back to the village, he returned to the area where he had fought the wolves earlier. Observing a wolf's carcass, he was surprised to find that it hadn't been immediately devoured as he'd thought. Looking closer, he noticed its fur, which was in surprisingly good condition. Remembering that Zozo had said fangs were proof of victory, he began to wonder if other parts of the wolf could be put to use. Switching his job to appraiser, he used his skills to learn more about the value of the wolf's remains. The silver wolf's fur was soft and warm, perfect for making clothes and blankets, while its meat, though a bit tough, was full of flavor. Pleased that the wolf's remains could be utilized, Amashiki decided not to let anything go to waste. Switching his job to psychic, he used his mental powers to lift the wolf carcasses off the ground. He decided to take them all back to the village. While he could have butchered them himself by switching to the hunter job, he felt he hadn't done enough for the day and would let the villagers handle it instead. With that decided, he continued his journey, the floating wolf carcasses creating a strange spectacle behind him. As he returned to the village, a panicked villager ran out shouting that there was big trouble, announcing that a monster was heading their way. Zozo asked if it was a silver wolf, fearing the worst had happened to Amashiki. As the entire village began to panic, one man said it was a giant monster, completely different from anything they had ever seen before. Just then, a huge mass of fur slowly emerged from the forest and appeared in the clearing outside the village, causing everyone to scream in terror. To the guards' surprise, they heard muffled voices coming from inside this creature. Zozo, though terrified, decided to approach and pulled a section of the fur aside, only to come face to face with a very irritated Amashiki. Amashiki was clearly exhausted, panting as he struggled to keep 11 wolf carcasses floating on his way back to the village. A horrified Zozo asked Amashiki what those things were, realizing they were silver wolves floating around him. Amashiki explained that they were levitating because of a psychic spell he had used. He figured that seeing real magic in action must be rare in such a remote place. Lining up the wolf carcasses, Amashiki began to explain how he had dealt with the pack and brought them back to make use of all their remains. Amashiki brought the carcasses back to the village thinking they could be put to some use. Zozo remarked that his skills were truly useful. When Esta arrived, Amashiki handed the village chief the bag of fangs as proof of his hunt. He told Esta that he had brought back the fangs from 11 silver wolves, but had defeated 13 in total. He had thoroughly checked the area to make sure no wolves remained, and believed he had broken the pack's formation. The entire village erupted in cheers upon hearing the news. Amashiki, surprised by the villagers' excitement, realized they must have been very worried about the threat of the wolf pack, especially since this was a village with no warriors. Additionally, the significant increase in his knowledge about the world around him made him feel it had been a very productive day. But his thoughts were quickly interrupted by a new development. Zozo excitedly slapped Amashiki hard on the back and shook him vigorously, thanking him profusely for what he had done, even though he kept insisting he was just doing his job. Then Esta approached, saying the entire village owed him their lives, and bowed his head in gratitude. Amashiki was taken aback by this, because he had exchanged his services for a reward and hadn't expected to receive so much gratitude. This brought back a memory of when he had landed a big contract with a company, only to be ridiculed by his colleagues and badmouthed behind his back. Back then, jealousy and tearing each other down were normal for him. Unable to stand the cheerful atmosphere around him any longer, Amashiki decided to change the subject by asking the villagers if they could handle butchering the wolf carcasses. This tactic worked as intended, as Zozo and the strongest men in the village stepped up to the task, quickly getting to work. The atmosphere instantly changed as the butchering began, shifting from celebration to focus and diligence. Esta asked Amashiki what he would do with the materials obtained from the butchering. Although he planned to sell the wolf pelts, he decided to donate all the meat to the villagers. Esta, along with the villagers, was incredibly grateful, as fresh meat was a rare treat for them. Soon the whole village was bustling with activity as everyone prepared for a grand feast. A large cauldron was placed over a fire, and everyone was called to bring whatever they could contribute from their homes. Wine was also brought out, because tonight they could drink without having to worry about the threat of the silver wolves. As he sat on a porch watching all the commotion, Amashiki thought to himself that the party had become a true festival, before he slumped to one side. Esta approached with a worried look, but he reassured him that he just needed a little rest and asked if he could stay the night. Esta immediately agreed and led him to his home. After taking off his adventuring gear, Amashiki collapsed onto the bed, ready to rest. This was the first time since coming to this world that he truly had a chance to relax. He felt he was off to a good start, and planned to use the village as a base to hunt monsters, level up, and learn more about the world he knew so little about. When he woke up, his eyes slowly adjusted to the light, and Amashiki was surprised to see light streaming in from the window, thinking it should have been nighttime. He wondered if it was possible that this world didn't have a nighttime. Amashiki was pulled from his thoughts by a knock on the door from Esta, who asked if he was awake. Quickly getting dressed, he opened the door, and the old man said he didn't want to wake him sooner because he'd seen how soundly he was sleeping, which was no surprise after his battle with the pack of silver wolves. Kindly, Esta offered him breakfast, unwrapping a cloth to reveal a wooden tray with freshly baked bread and a milk-based stew with meat and vegetables. Having eaten nothing since noon the previous day, Amashiki thanked him and accepted, eagerly beginning to eat. Carefully blowing on the spoonful of food to cool it, he took his first bite and noticed the subtle sweetness of the milk, blended perfectly with the vegetables. He could make out pieces of carrot and potato, feeling his stomach gradually fill as he scooped up a piece of meat. Amashiki wondered if the meat he was chewing was from the silver wolves he had defeated. As he chewed, he could taste a beef-like flavor seeping out, blending with the milky aroma, making it hard to imagine this taste came from such a fearsome-looking creature. The bread seemed to soak up all the moisture in his mouth, but it was perfect for dipping into the stew, creating a delicious combination. The flavor was simple, but it was exactly what he needed after a long day. As he ate, he suddenly felt as if someone from his past was watching over his shoulder. But when he turned, no one was there. After eating his fill, Amashiki thanked Esta's wife for the meal. Then, the village chief led him to another room to give him his reward for defeating the pack of silver wolves. Opening the money pouch, Amashiki poured its entire contents onto the table and counted 13 silver coins. However, he had no idea how much they were worth, as he was unfamiliar with this world's currency system. He apologized, explaining that he wasn't used to the value of money due to living in seclusion in the mountains for a long time, and asked Esta for a brief explanation. Understanding his situation, Esta explained that a few silver coins would be enough to buy a light meal, enough to fill one's stomach. Even so, Amashiki felt just as confused as before. After asking a few more questions, he decided to convert the currency in his head at a certain rate. Iron coin, 10 yen. Copper coin, 100 yen. Silver coin, 1,000 yen. Gold coin, 10,000 yen. And finally, large gold coins worth 1 million yen. With his current funds, Amashiki realized his entire fortune was only worth about 13,000 yen, and he concluded that he should aim for the large gold coins if he wanted to improve his financial situation. Esta explained that the Adventurers Guild set the reward for each silver wolf at 1 silver coin, and although prices might vary by region, they always followed this standard. Amashiki made a mental note of this information, while Esta emphasized that lying or haggling over the price could give the village a bad reputation. That could lead to travelers or adventurers refusing the village's quests, causing them to lose crucial support. Pondering this, Amashiki realized that if that happened, no one would come to help the village anymore, making this a matter of survival for them. If they didn't follow the rules, the village could have taken advantage of the ignorance of people like Amashiki regarding standard prices. Then, village chief Esta gave him the payment for the 11 wolf pelts he had brought back. After counting the money, Amashiki saw that it was over 50 copper coins. Esta explained that the usual price was 8 copper coins per pelt, but they had adjusted the price to compensate for the damage caused by the battle. Amashiki reassured the old man, saying he didn't mind about the value of the materials. If he were still working in Japan, he probably would have negotiated the price, but here, he understood that fairness was of the utmost importance to the village. Amashiki realized that Esta was the first person he had interacted with since coming to this world, and although money was important, he didn't want to strain their relationship. With a bit of hesitation, village chief Esta went on to make another request of his guest. He revealed that some villagers had been injured by the silver wolves and needed medicine, but the village was short on dosal herbs, the main ingredient for making the remedy. Amashiki immediately realized that those were the same herbs he had gathered in the forest a few days ago. He thought that he could heal their wounds by changing his job class to priest, but worried that might be seen as overstepping and diminish their gratitude. Respecting the villagers' ways, he decided to do things their way, and gave the village chief the dosal herbs he had collected. The old man, Esta, was surprised to learn that Amashiki had even gathered herbs while hunting, remarking that he truly left nothing to be desired. Amashiki tried to brush off the praise, but Esta quickly headed for the door, suggesting they take the herbs to the apothecary's house immediately. Amashiki was surprised to hear there was another job class holder in the village, but the old man quickly explained that this woman wasn't a professional apothecary. This left Amashiki a bit disappointed, as he had hoped to learn more information from a real one. Esta knocked on the door of a house, and a small, elderly woman leaning on a cane threw the door open. She immediately scolded in a reproachful tone that she couldn't make medicine without dosal herbs. Amashiki was taken aback by the old woman's curt words, but Esta quickly addressed her as Gerda, and revealed that they had brought the herbs. The old woman grumpily replied that he should have said so in the first place, then invited them inside. As he stepped through the doorway, Amashiki was immediately hit by a wave of scents from the various herbs stored inside the house. Gerda beckoned with her finger, demanding he hand over the herbs. Amashiki quickly complied, and the old woman inspected them thoroughly. Gerda confirmed that they were indeed dosal herbs, and she could use them to make medicine for the injured. She added that if he had brought the wrong kind, pseudozol, a fake herb, she wouldn't have hesitated to teach him a lesson. Model. Amashiki raised his hand as if he were in a classroom, ready to ask a question. Amashiki asked the old woman if she could make medicine without the pharmacist's profession. Gerda reacted by angrily pointing her staff at him, shouting that anyone with the necessary knowledge and skills could make medicine. Just like you don't have to be a chef to cook. Realizing she had a point, Amashiki wondered what the difference was between having a profession and not, and questioned the benefits of being a pharmacist. Even so, Gerda frankly admitted she didn't know much about it. She explained that the profession brings knowledge naturally, allowing its holder to know how to effectively create, gather, and mix ingredients. From this, Amashiki concluded that in this world, a profession not only grants skills, but also optimizes and enhances its holder's knowledge. Amashiki thanked Gerda and turned to leave, but the old woman insisted on keeping him to help, saying she needed a man to assist with making the medicine. Esta, without a moment's hesitation, left him behind and disappeared. Not long after, Amashiki was groaning and gritting his teeth in frustration. as he tried to crush herbs with a mortar and pestle. When he was finished, he presented the mixture to Gerda, and the old woman gave it a reluctant pass, only to hand him another mortar filled with fresh herbs to grind again, much to his extreme annoyance. He thought to himself that they only needed dozo, so he couldn't understand why he had to do these unrelated tasks. While angrily grinding the new batch of herbs, Amashiki muttered complaints that all he was doing was manual labor, instead of learning how to make medicine as he had hoped. The old woman Gerda then told Amashiki to use the stone mill after he finished grinding, not forgetting to yell and remind him to get on with his work. Exhausted, Amashiki decided to change things up a bit to test how much a profession could improve his efficiency. He activated the pharmacist profession, immediately catching Gerda's attention. Now he could clearly understand the role of each herb, not to mention that using the pharmacist's tools became incredibly easy. Gerda, with a hint of suspicion, remarked that his sudden improvement was strange, but Amashiki was completely captivated by his new skills. He now understood how to adjust his body to better suit the workflow. Amashiki excitedly asked Gerda if they were going to dry the herbs and offered to help. He then used a special magic skill that only a pharmacist possessed to quickly dry the herbs before handing them to her with a radiant smile. However, Gerda wasn't convinced. She stared at him suspiciously, reminding him that he had said he was a mage, and that mages don't have magic that can instantly dry herbs. The smile on Amashiki's face vanished instantly. He felt the tension in the air and quickly explained that his main profession was Job Changer, which allowed him to switch from a mage to a pharmacist. Gerda was stunned to hear this, and when Amashiki asked if that was strange, she furiously declared, "Of course it's strange!" She even remarked that his appearance looked somewhat different. Gerda yelled that changing professions at will was unheard of, and told him to use common sense, which Amashiki found rather ironic in a world of swords and magic. After calming down, she explained that a profession is something a person is born with, and no one can choose or change it. This made Amashiki realize that his previous belief, that he could change jobs at temples or churches like in a video game, was wrong. Although there are geniuses who can master their profession and reach higher levels, fundamentally changing jobs is impossible, even for them. Realizing that even with all her knowledge, Gerda knew nothing about the job changer, Amashiki started to believe that his profession might be unique in this world. Gerda warned him to be careful with how he used this power, to which he agreed with a knowing smile. Gerda remarked that if he was now a pharmacist, he would be a valuable asset in combat. Amashiki was taken aback by this statement. Not wanting to help any further or agree to any more requests at this point, he made the excuse that he wasn't skilled enough yet. However, Gerda was persistent. She asked his current level and insisted that if he was only a level 1 pharmacist, that was all the more reason for him to try. She explained that even at a low level, the more knowledge and experience he gathered, the more types of medicine he could make, and that required him to put in his best effort. With that said, she went into her herb storage. Gerda remarked that in a world where life is paramount, it wouldn't be a bad thing for him to learn more about medicine. Gerda threw a pile of herbs at Amashiki, her words leaving no room for protest. At that moment, Amashiki finally realized that this old woman was truly a witch. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, a horned rabbit stepped gently through the sunbeams, filtering through the canopy, enjoying the peace, oblivious to the world around it. Another rabbit was nibbling on some chestnuts, making it look on with desire, and decided to challenge its rival to claim the prize. After a brief clash of horns, the first rabbit emerged victorious and proudly claimed its prize. But before it could enjoy its reward, it was taken down by a single arrow from Amashiki's bow, while the other horned rabbit fled in terror. Amashiki triumphantly held up his prey as a chime sounded, signaling that he had leveled up once again. He had been living in this village for a week, venturing into the forest each day to hunt any monster that crossed his path. His main prey were the horned rabbits, whose tender and juicy meat could be prepared into many delicious dishes, making them an irresistible choice for a meal. And the reason for this lifestyle? It all started when he was thoroughly exploited in his work by Gerda, the village's so-called pharmacist. On his way home, Amashiki felt dejected about his life as a job changer, constantly having to seek out battles and now being cornered like this. Just then, Zozo and some villagers approached, saying they were on their way to the village's hunting grounds and asked for his help with a major problem they were facing. Amashiki decided to go with them, believing his hunter skills could be useful to the village in other ways as well. They began to check the traps the villagers had set. The hunting traps laid by the villagers were all untouched, and they couldn't understand why, especially since the pack of silver wolves had been wiped out. Some wondered if the creatures might have changed their feeding grounds. Amashiki remained silent, but his hunter's instinct allowed him to sense panic among the animals and smaller monsters. He believed his class could help him understand the cause of this anomaly. Thanks to the vast knowledge his hunter class provided, Amashiki deduced that another pack was trying to encroach on the area. The villagers began to panic, but he reassured them that the threat was likely not immediate, but it would be best to be cautious on a certain side of the village. The villagers returned home, disappointed at having caught nothing, but Amashiki decided to keep searching the forest and hunt for a while longer. As a result, he reached level 8, and his hunter class reached level 5. However, he noticed that leveling up had become more difficult, making him wonder if he should leave this place to find a new one. Although the appearance of new monster packs was a concern, he was still just a guest in this village, and hesitated to make the decision to leave. While he was pondering this, he noticed the village was especially bustling today. As he entered the village, he was surprised to see a group of merchants selling their wares to the villagers. Zozo approached to greet him, confirming that a traveling merchant caravan had just arrived to supply the villagers with goods. The goods the merchants brought were things that couldn't be found in the area, including spices, high-quality fabrics, pots and pans, and weapons. Amashiki felt a surge of excitement, knowing that merchants often moved from one place to another, and would leave as soon as their business in the village was done. This presented him with an opportunity to join the caravan and travel to a new land. He saw the arrival of the merchant caravan right when he was considering his next move, as a sign from fate urging him to leave. As Zozo drew near, Amashiki simply handed him the horned rabbit carcass, then hurried over to a nearby merchant, asking to be taken to their leader to speak with them. The merchant agreed, gesturing to a well-dressed man named Giselle who was taking inventory of his goods inside one of the wagons. After they sat down, Giselle told Amashiki that they would be departing for the city of Rassel in 2 days, and invited him to join the caravan. When Amashiki accepted, the merchant asked him to help protect the caravan on their journey, noting that having a class holder like him would be very reliable. Amashiki wondered how the man knew he was a class holder when he had never mentioned it. But he soon deduced they must have gathered information from the villagers while trading, which made perfect sense for how merchants operated. To him, this was not a bad deal at all. Amashiki agreed to take on the role of a guard, and the merchant informed him they would depart early in the morning, 2 days later, extending his hand for a handshake. Amashiki was surprised to realize that handshakes were also a form of greeting in this world, but his thoughts were quickly interrupted when Zozo approached. Having overheard everything, Amashiki told Zozo he had just decided on a whim, but when he saw the boy was sad that he was about to leave the village, he was suddenly reminded of one of the many times he had quit a job back in Japan, when he had declared that there was nothing left to hold him back. Zozo snapped Amashiki out of his thoughts when he noticed he was spacing out. Amashiki apologized for not discussing it with him first, then excitedly revealed that he wanted to explore more of the world and become stronger. Impressed by this drive, the friendly boy patted him on the shoulder, saying that although he was sad Amashiki was leaving, he respected his decision, as it was his life to live. As Zozo wished him a safe journey, Amashiki thought that the boy was a truly good person, and he was glad Zozo was the first person he'd met in this world. After that, Amashiki went to Esta's house to inform him of his decision. Although he felt a hint of regret about leaving, he was all the more grateful for how the village elder had always been willing to answer his naive questions without the slightest irritation. Bowing his head, Amashiki apologized for leaving after all Esta had done for him, but unexpectedly the old man just placed a hand on his shoulder, reassuring him that he had helped the village through its crisis and had contributed a great deal. He said that it was they who were indebted to him, his voice full of warmth and gratitude. Next, Amashiki visited Gerda, and true to her gruff nature, she just made a dry comment about him leaving. The apothecary job was the one he had leveled up the most, and whether it was thanks to her harsh training, relentless exploitation, or even abuse, he knew he had learned a great deal from her. He reflected on his experiences, noting an important lesson. He had to be careful about revealing his job-changing ability. Despite her unpleasant exterior, Amashiki realized that amidst the grueling tasks Gerda assigned, she had imparted knowledge to him that probably belonged to a higher tier of the apothecary profession. He also understood that her skills might even rival those of a true job holder. He didn't know how many years it had taken her to accumulate that wealth of knowledge and experience. But when using the ability of a job holder, Amashiki felt as if he were tapping into a collective intelligence, one that included the very experiences someone like Gerda had amassed over the years. Gerda remarked that he seemed reluctant to leave, and when he denied it, she just smiled knowingly. Then she declared that they had to cram as much knowledge into him as possible before he left. She motioned for the merchants to bring in bags filled with newly bought herbs, then reminded him he didn't have much time before his departure. Gerda ordered Amashiki to get started right away. And so, despite not having much luggage to pack or preparations to make, he was roped into helping Gerda right up until the last minute. On the morning of his departure, Amashiki joined the merchant caravan, and the villagers gathered at the gate to see him off. Amashiki was surprised to see so many people, but a merchant remarked that it was only natural as he had become their benefactor. Everyone warmly said their goodbyes, wishing him all the best. Amashiki smiled before climbing onto the carriage and setting off on his journey. Staying any longer might have dulled his edge, and that wasn't like him, but he was truly happy that this village had been his starting point. In this world, Amashiki's peaceful moments of reflection never lasted long. As he sensed a new pack of silver wolves approaching, the merchant caravan panicked at the sudden threat, immediately whipping the horses into a full gallop. Springing into action, Amashiki told them to keep the horses running while he handled the threat and cleared the path. He realized the silver wolves were targeting the horses and laying an ambush, just as he'd predicted. Ready for his final task, Amashiki switched his job to sorcerer, summoning stone lances from the ground that pierced several of the pursuing wolves. He continued to fire more lances at the other targets, and as one wolf managed to close in on the side of the carriage, Amashiki leaped from the carriage, while the young merchants held onto his legs, and finished off the last wolf. With a precise arrow, Giselle praised him for taking care of the pack, offering to stop the horses so he could collect his spoils. However, Amashiki advised him to continue the journey, as he didn't want to delay a busy merchant over a minor reward. Though he didn't say it out loud, Amashiki was really looking forward to reaching the new town, hoping to gain more experience there. As the caravan continued down the stone-paved road towards Raisel, Amashiki passed the time chatting with the young merchants amidst the cargo. One of them commented on his job case, remarking that it was highly unusual and suggesting he sell it for a profit. However, Amashiki declined, unwilling to part with his item. The conversation ended when Giselle, who was driving the carriage, announced that they could see Raisel in the distance. Peeking his head out from the back of the wagon, Amashiki was captivated by the view before him. The vast medieval city of Raisel, surrounded by sturdy walls, came into clear view. As he approached one of the gates, he noticed a long line forming ahead, where two spear-wielding guards were inspecting those entering the city. His excitement quickly turned to anxiety, as Amashiki realized he had no papers or any proof to verify his identity in this world. The thought of being arrested and imprisoned right at the gate sent a slight panic through him. Amashiki asked Giselle if he needed anything to enter the city. The cheerful merchant told him he just needed to show his status plate to the guards and pay an entrance fee of 100 gold. Relieved, Amashiki continued to watch the crowd, and noticed some people simply presented a type of ID card and were immediately let through by the guards without paying a fee. Giselle explained that those were adventurers, and the fee was waived for anyone registered with the Adventurers Guild and possessing a guild card. Similar privileges applied to members of the Merchants Guild, like Giselle and his fellow merchants. The merchants carried a certificate confirming their status. Amashiki appreciated the convenience of this system, noting that for professions that required frequent travel, like adventurers or merchants, paying a fee every time they entered or left a city would be a huge burden. When it was his turn, Amashiki presented his status plate to the smiling guard. He offered the plate with his usual formal flair. Although the plate displayed his job as job changer with mage in parentheses, Amashiki knew that others should only see the mage job. He had confirmed this multiple times with Gerda back in the village. The guard remarked that it was rare to meet a job holder and asked if he planned to become an adventurer. When Amashiki confirmed that he did indeed want to spend some time as an adventurer in the city, the guard welcomed him as a new member of the city. After the merchant caravan was cleared, the group proceeded inside the city. Hearing that Amashiki wanted to work at the Adventurers Guild, Giselle kindly offered to take him near the guild headquarters by carriage, for which he was very grateful. Amashiki's goal was to master all jobs and build a good life, even in another world. His approach to life hadn't changed, and in these new circumstances, defeating monsters was the fastest way to achieve his goal. Moreover, being able to work freely in this world was a wonderful thing for Amashiki, as he couldn't do that in his previous life in Japan, where freelancing was often seen as a form of unemployment. Upon reaching their destination, Giselle thanked Amashiki for escorting him and the caravan safely to the city and presented him with his reward. Amashiki accepted it with a polite bow. Smiling, Amashiki asked what the merchant caravan would do next. As they hurriedly unloaded goods from the carriage, Giselle announced that they would start another journey as soon as they restocked, as transport and trade were their main business. Amashiki was surprised by their work pace and the fact that they wouldn't be resting at all in the city. He wished them well, shook hands with Giselle, and then parted ways with the caravan. With his familiar briefcase in hand, Amashiki walked along the cobblestone road toward the Adventurers Guild. Along the way, he encountered many of the non-human species living in this fantasy world, including elves, beastmen, lizardmen, and dwarves. Finally, he arrived before a large stone building, with an emblem bearing a compass rose on a checkered background, proudly displayed above the large double doors. Stepping through the threshold, Amashiki found himself in a spacious main hall filled with tables and chairs, bookshelves, a notice board, and a reception counter. As a former office worker, Amashiki headed for a reception counter and ran his finger across the countertop, finding it immaculately clean. Holding to his belief that an organization with a clean entrance is always trustworthy, he judged the Adventurers Guild to be not bad. However, he didn't realize how strange he looked to the adventurers passing by. His thoughts were interrupted when a woman in uniform, wearing the guild's emblem on her beret, called for the next person in line. Approaching the counter, he was welcomed to the Russell branch of the Adventurers Guild by the beautiful young woman. She introduced herself as Lucia, an employee at this establishment. Amashiki introduced himself as well and said he was there to register as an adventurer. The young woman asked him to pay a registration fee of 500 gold and present his status plate, while she pulled some papers from a drawer. As she inspected Amashiki's status plate, Lucia was surprised to see that he was a mage, a job holder. She declared there was no need to worry about his combat ability, nor were there any issues with his age or level, so they could proceed with the registration. Lucia brought out a magic box, telling him to place his status plate inside to issue his guild card. Shortly after the guild card was created, and as Amashiki picked it up to examine it, Lucia explained the Adventurers Guild ranking system. The guild's ranking system consists of 7 ranks from S to F, with S being the highest. Achieving the highest rank is no easy feat, and only a select few have managed it. These high-ranking individuals are all job holders, including prestigious jobs like Dragon Knight. Lucia continued her explanation, mentioning other prominent figures such as Tylan, a beast tamer named Odonye, and especially the Holy Knight Stefia, a legendary warrior who looks 1,000 years old. Although not an adventurer, Stefia is a temple knight, and according to Lucia, temple knights with high-tier jobs like hers often possess skills on par with S-rankers. Amashiki couldn't help but applaud Lucia's enthusiastic explanation, impressed by her passion for her work and her deep knowledge. Lucia also mentioned that the method to obtain a high-tier job is a closely guarded secret, but Amashiki, as a job changer, already knew how to do it. However, he wasn't at a high enough level yet, but attaining a high-tier job was a goal he aimed for in the future. Concluding her explanation, Lucia thanked him for listening. Lucia told Amashiki that he would start with F-rank quests since he had just registered. However, because he was a job holder, he could still take on quests. She also explained that he would be able to take on higher-ranked quests if he formed a party. As they watched an enthusiastic group of adventurers prepare for a new quest, Lucia noted that the guild doesn't encourage taking on quests beyond one's rank unless joining a trustworthy party. Lucia explained that the Adventurers Guild would decide on promotions based on how he completed quests and could also demote him if his performance was unsatisfactory. Hearing this, Amashiki compared the Adventurers Guild to a recruitment agency that connects adventurers with clients. Amashiki remarked that the guild couldn't just let people who weren't suited for their rank take on higher-level quests and fail repeatedly. Being demoted if your skills don't match your rank might sound harsh in this world, but for someone like Amashiki who had experienced capitalist society in Japan, it was just business as usual. With a hint of nostalgia, he recalled a former colleague who used to brown-nose the boss and got promoted, only to be demoted later when he was exposed as a fraud, losing all respect from everyone around him. After listening to Lucia's entire explanation, Amashiki bowed politely to thank her, which made her blush unexpectedly. Noticing this, he asked if something was wrong. Lucia admitted she was a bit surprised to see him being so humble despite being a job holder. Amashiki was taken aback by such a reaction just for showing respect for her work, and he recalled how he used to receive unusually high praise back in his village for his polite behavior. He wondered how many other job holders had an unpleasant attitude, remarking that they were certainly strong. And if someone were born with such power, it wouldn't be surprising if they became arrogant and thought they were superior to others. Amashiki didn't want to become the type of person who used their status as a job holder to lord it over others. But then he wondered if that very thought was a subtle form of boasting. His train of thought was interrupted when Lucia called him back to reality. Amashiki turned his attention to the notice boards in the main hall. Although he had no intention of taking a quest right away, he was curious to see what they entailed. He saw postings for a wide variety of quests, such as monster hunting, herb gathering, street cleaning, transporting goods, running errands, and even caregiving, showing that the Adventurers Guild really did handle all sorts of jobs. One particular quest for elderly care caught his eye, and he noticed it required a specific job. Looking closer, he saw that the quest involved assisting an elderly elf, and required the sage job at level 80 or higher, with a huge reward attached. Looking at the quest, he realized it was an A-rank mission, a major challenge. Amashiki was thrilled at the prospect of earning so much money as an adventurer. Earning such a large sum on his own was one of the perks of being a freelancer, and perhaps due to his nature as a job changer, he was extremely excited to see so many opportunities before him. He resolved to take on many quests, starting tomorrow, focusing on advancing his career. As he walked along the streets of Rassel, Amashiki was a little lost as he searched for the inn Giselle had recommended. Eventually, he found a 2-story building with a sign hanging over the door that read, "The Tiger Cat Inn." After confirming this was the place, he went inside. Amashiki recalled Giselle telling him that this place had cute staff, and he wondered what the servers would be like. Back in Japan, a colleague had once recommended a place to Amashiki, advertising it as having cute staff and complete privacy, saying he would love it. But it turned out to be a completely different kind of establishment, and the memory still left a bitter taste in his mouth. This unpleasant memory was cut short when a gentle voice welcomed him. Turning around, he saw a childlike beast girl waving and inviting him in. Amashiki immediately relaxed, realizing this was what Giselle meant by cute staff. He nodded in agreement with that assessment and asked about lodging. The beast girl informed him that one night without meals cost 600 gold, and he could order any food he liked in the dining hall. Amashiki was satisfied with the price and nodded in agreement. Amashiki booked a room for a week, and the beast girl told him the cost would be 4,200 gold. She then asked him to write his name in the guest book, offering to do it for him if he couldn't write. As he wrote his name, the beast girl watched with fascination as the quill pen moved across the page. After reading his name, she introduced herself as Nola. After they finished the paperwork, Nola cheerfully led him upstairs, saying that since Giselle had recommended him, she would prepare a little something special for him later. Seeing Nola's cheerful demeanor, Amashiki understood why Giselle had been so enthusiastic in her recommendation. Turning the key, she opened the door to his room, and Amashiki saw a fairly spacious room. Light streamed in from the window, and it was furnished with a bed, desk, chair, and wardrobe. Amashiki felt a thrill of excitement. This room was much more spacious than the cramped one he had lived in since childhood back in Japan. From the layout, he could also tell it would be far more comfortable to live in. When he complimented the room, Nola excitedly said that she always made sure to clean it thoroughly. Nola cleaned the rooms every day because they didn't want any of them to be dirty or smelly, which pleased Amashiki greatly. He speculated that with their keen sense of smell, beast folk would naturally prefer to keep things clean. However, another thought suddenly crossed his mind. He had been traveling for a week, and even though he'd wiped himself down with hot water magic, he wasn't sure if he smelled or not. Feeling a little uneasy at the thought, he asked Nola if there was a place in town to bathe. She smiled adorably and confirmed that there was. Before long, Amashiki found himself in a large, medieval-style public bathhouse, much bigger than he had imagined. Walking through vaulted corridors with a towel and basin provided by the establishment, Amashiki realized the place could hold 50 or even 100 people at once. A large circular bath particularly caught his attention, and he noticed a sign warning of deep water, making him wonder why such a bath existed. His doubts vanished instantly when a large lizardman walked past, entered that bath, and submerged himself in the warm water. He quickly realized that the facility had many types of baths, designed to accommodate different races. He then chose a shallow bath meant for dwarves and soaked himself. Amashiki found his first experience in a public bathhouse in another world to be quite enjoyable. However, he reminded himself not to get too carried away, as one needed to behave properly in a bathhouse. Amashiki was slightly distracted by the small bath intended for mischievous sprite, but then noticed other bathers starting to wash their hair. He found the pink color of the provided shampoo rather unusual, and seeing both dwarves and beast folk using it, he wondered if it was suitable for humans. He switched his job to appraiser to check the product's ingredients. Through this, he learned that the shampoo was made from milky fluid, had a pleasant fragrance, excellent cleaning power, and was designed to promote balanced, healthy hair. The body soap was crafted from fruit by alchemists and was recommended for humans. Although he felt a little uneasy knowing the shampoo was made from a bodily fluid, he chose not to dwell on it, telling himself it was probably harvested from some cute creature. He then poured some shampoo into his hand and started working it into his hair. Amashiki noted the shampoo's light floral scent, which wasn't unpleasant or out of place. Even for a man, it also made his hair incredibly smooth. He then walked over to another pool, but as he dipped his foot in, he found the water to be too hot for him. Even if he wanted to dilute it with cold water, the faucet was blocked by a burly, scarred man who looked like a regular. As a newcomer to town, he remembered the saying when in Rome, "Do as the Romans do," and decided to endure it, slowly sinking into the water. The searing heat spread through his body, forcing him to grimace. Noticing his discomfort, the muscular man scooted aside, smiled, and pointed towards a suspiciously colorful button on the wall. When Amashiki pressed the button, a powerful stream of water poured down from a demon gargoyle right above him, startling him for a moment. Sensing a faint magical power, he wondered if the bathhouse was heating its water using a magic circle built into the walls. He figured this must be what they called a magic tool. As both he and the muscular man relaxed under the stream of water, Amashiki remarked to himself that life in an otherworld town was more comfortable than he had expected. He really needed a proper bath, and the hot water felt like it was washing away all the fatigue from his journey. The magically heated water seemed to make everyone, regardless of race, feel relaxed. Even in another world, a public bath was still a place of comfort. Feeling his body rejuvenated, Amashiki stood up, ready for tomorrow's adventures. But when he noticed a lizard man relaxing in a jacuzzi, he didn't want to miss the chance to experience something new. Amashiki walked over to the adjacent tub and pressed the button, only to be immediately blown away for not reading the warning signs on the wall. After a good night's sleep at the Tiger Cat Inn, he went down to the dining hall for breakfast. Nola greeted him cheerfully, asking if he slept well and what he wanted for breakfast. She suggested the wild boar steak, and Amashiki agreed to her recommendation. Nola called out to her father, a large lion beastman, to prepare the steak, while her mother handled the vegetables. The father immediately got to work, and after a short while, Amashiki was sitting in front of a large plate with a huge steak, a hot drink, and a bowl of salad. Amashiki watched Nola carry heavy trays across the room as if they were nothing, realizing that the young beast girl was incredibly strong for her age. As he began to eat, he found the steak to be absolutely delicious. The meat was perfectly marbled and didn't have the unpleasant, gamey smell of the wolf meat he had eaten not long ago. Eating steak for breakfast was truly beyond his imagination, as he was used to Japanese cuisine. However, his trip down memory lane was cut short by a troublesome guest, loudly demanding that Nola serve him first, considering himself more important than a mere adventurer. His arrogance was quickly silenced when Nola's father emerged from the kitchen, holding two massive swords with a threatening glare. Amashiki had to help calm the father down by twisting the troublesome guest's arm. After casually changing his job and finishing breakfast, Amashiki headed to the Adventurers Guild. He was stunned to see a massive brawl unfolding inside as adventurers fought over quest slips. Lausia greeted him and calmly explained that the quest registration forms are posted early in the morning, so the guild is usually crowded at this time. She added that brawls like this were a common occurrence. When one adventurer loudly declared that he had been waiting at the guild's gates since the night before to claim a quest, Lucia quickly quelled the brawl by sternly reminding everyone that she had warned them before. Anyone who stayed up all night would not get priority. Amashiki, not wanting to jump into the fray, was told by Lausia that he could accept a quest directly from her. She handed him a quest to gather dozal herbs. Amashiki accepted the quest, which made Lucia very happy, and she quickly began the paperwork. She explained that dozal herbs are hard to find and highly sought after, often leading to shortages. Therefore, the guild desperately needs quests like this to be completed. Hearing this, Amashiki enthusiastically declared he would gather as many herbs as he could, which delighted Lucia and the other guild staff. Afterward, he rented a basket and prepared to leave. Before he left, Lucia reminded him that even though he had a job, he was still a new registrant and should prioritize his safety first. Amashiki nodded in agreement, understanding the importance of listening to others in a professional environment. With a skill he wanted to test out in his pharmacist role, he planned to gather as many dozal herbs as possible to impress the guild, build a solid track record, and take on bigger quests in the future. With this goal in mind, he eagerly set to work. As an F-rank adventurer, Amashiki headed to the shallower parts of the forest to gather dozal herbs, as this plant grows in areas that aren't too deep in the woods. The reward was 50 gold per plant, with a minimum requirement of 10 plants to complete the quest. Additionally, upon successful completion, he would receive a 200 gold bonus. In total, he would earn 700 gold, just enough to cover his daily lodging costs at the Tiger Cat Inn. Amashiki realized the profit from this quest was almost negligible, which led him to switch his job to pharmacist to optimize his efficiency. This job provided starting skills like enhancing medicinal effects and potion crafting. But at level 10, he unlocked the herb detection skill. Using this skill, he could quickly spot dozal herbs, identifying them by their characteristic red glow, while also distinguishing them from fake dozal herbs. The skill also helped him find herbs in the most hidden spots. Although the skill couldn't detect herbs he had never gathered before, he was confident it would make him a champion herb collector. At the end of the day, Amashiki returned to the Adventurers Guild, where he was greeted by Lucia. She asked if he had managed to gather enough herbs. He confirmed that he had by dropping 2 large sacks containing about 200 dozal herbs. Lucia and her colleagues were stunned by the sheer number of dozal herbs Amashiki brought back. As they inspected them, they wondered how it was possible to gather so many in just one morning. After deciding to count the herbs, they finally confirmed he had brought back 206 dozal plants. Lucia wondered how he could have gathered so many without being a pharmacist, suspiciously asking if he was really a mage. Anticipating this question, Amashiki explained that he had undergone harsh training under a secluded pharmacist, specifically mentioning Gerda as the reason for his herb-gathering skills. Lucia, accepting his explanation, immediately blushed and apologized for losing her composure. After confirming he had met the required amount, Lucia verified that the quest was complete and asked if he wanted to sell the remaining 196 dozal herbs to the guild. Amashiki agreed, earning him a total of 10,300 gold, a truly impressive sum for an adventurer. He recalled the times he had silently, or sometimes not so silently, cursed Gerda for constantly overworking him as a pharmacist. But as it turned out, leveling up this job hadn't been a waste at all. Since there was still time left in the day, he went on to accept 2 more quests. Gathering Kirik herbs and Sveil herbs. This made the association staff a little nervous, but it overjoyed Lucia. Lucia asked if he planned to gather large quantities of Kirik and Sveil herbs as he had before. Amashiki nodded, confirming that these herbs were essential for various purposes, which made the guild staff turn pale at the thought of having to count such a huge amount once more. Shortly after, he returned to the association carrying large sacks filled with herbs. As the staff struggled to count them all, Lucia gently suggested that he try a monster extermination quest. Feigning modesty, Amashiki replied that an ordinary adventurer like him should probably start with gathering quests just as he had been. But Lucia wasn't accepting this excuse, forcefully slapping 2 extermination quests down on the counter. Lucia enthusiastically declared that he was no ordinary adventurer, stressing that she'd never heard of an F-rank adventurer capable of gathering hundreds of herbs in just half a day. Even so, Amashiki remained hesitant, asking if Rassel was running short on herbs and confessing that he rather enjoyed gathering them in the forest. Lucia assured him that, thanks to him, that problem had been solved. She insisted that he was clearly not a normal F-rank adventurer, noting that the association didn't want to see talented individuals go to waste. She then suggested he take the monster extermination quest to rank up, explaining that the association believed promoting him would be no problem if he just completed a few more quests. The prospect of ranking up completely changed Amashiki's attitude, and he eagerly jumped at the chance to take on the monster extermination quests, determined to defeat any monster that stood in the way of his promising career. Excited, he asked which quest to take. Lucia presented him with 2. Exterminate kobolds and red boars. He decided to accept both quests at once, surprising Lucia, but she approved, noting that it should be fine for a sorcerer like him. Still, she reminded him to be careful. Having been transported to this world, where he had already faced a mysterious giant mantis and defeated various monsters, including silver wolves, Amashiki believed he was well beyond the level of a beginner adventurer. Both kobolds and red boars were common monsters, so he began to wonder which he should hunt first. Amashiki's train of thought was cut short when he realized he had been gathering herbs out of habit. Instead of focusing on the monster extermination quest, he reminded himself to stay on his guard, since it wouldn't be surprising if monsters appeared at any moment. And right on cue, he immediately came face to face with a red boar. The beast charged at him the moment they made eye contact, but Amashiki swiftly dispatched it with a stone spear straight to its head. Celebrating his small victory, he realized this was the source of the steak he'd eaten before, but that realization had to wait as two more boars suddenly burst from the bushes to attack. They too were quickly defeated by stone spears erupting from the ground. Having completed the first extermination quest without a scratch, Amashiki collected the boar tusk as proof of the quest's completion. When he checked his stats, he saw he'd gained stats suited for a sorcerer and leveled up the job as well. While he knew this was a positive thing, he also admitted it might make his abilities a bit unbalanced. As a job changer, his strength lay in his adaptability and his flexible use of various jobs. The more cards he had up his sleeve, the stronger he would become. With that thought, Amashiki decided to test this ability during the kobold extermination quest. He soon came across a kobold, a dog-like humanoid monster, and launched his attack. He switched his job to thief, rushed the enemy with his face covered, and snatched the spear from its claws before it even realized what was happening. The stunned monster stared at its empty claws, but Amashiki had already switched his job to spearman and was using the creature's own weapon against it, easily felling it with a single powerful thrust that sent it flying backward. He then turned his attention to its remaining comrades, confident he could handle them. Twirling the spear skillfully, he parried the first kobold's attack, knocking it back, then turned to face the second, sweeping its legs out from under it with the spear. As the monster fell, he quickly finished it off with a stab through the chest, taking down the last of his foes. Standing amidst the carnage, Amashiki gave a self-satisfied smile, his second extermination quest complete. Returning to the Adventurers Association, he presented the boar tusks and kobold tails to Lucia as proof, reporting his success. A delighted Lucia congratulated Amashiki and announced that he had been officially promoted to E rank, adding with admiration that he was the first person to rank up so quickly after registering at the association. An incredible achievement. Surprised, Amashiki figured it wasn't that rare for a job holder, but Lucia countered that even among job holders, not everyone could clear quests so quickly. She added that the fastest promotion record at any other branch was still 10 days. Seeing the excitement of the association staff, Amashiki realized what a huge accomplishment it was, but he humbly told Lucia he planned to keep working hard and aim for D rank. This prompted her to tease him, saying that E rank was just the beginning. With his sights set on the higher goal of S rank, Amashiki confidently struck a victory pose. He was pulled back to reality when Lucia mentioned that monster extermination quest would increase in difficulty from E rank on. She advised him to always carry recovery and healing potions. Snapping out of it, he remembered that potions were magical items created by alchemists. Although he could craft them himself, he wanted to see the finished products firsthand for his own research. He asked Lucia where he could buy potions, and she pointed him to a shop run by an alchemist, located north of the association along the main road. Amashiki was thrilled to realize the shopkeeper was also a job holder, a fact Lucia confirmed with a slight, bashful blush. He quickly set off down the main road, eager to meet another job holder for the first time. Ideally, he wanted to build a good relationship with this alchemist for his future studies. However, he had to admit that Lucia's vague answer about the job holder's skills made him a bit nervous. He recalled that many job holders were difficult to deal with and wondered if it was a personality issue. He just hoped this meeting wouldn't be too much of a hassle. After a fairly long walk from the association, he figured he must be close and began to look for the alchemist home. His search didn't last long, however, because just moments later, he was rendered almost speechless by the sight of his destination.